This is Dr. Tawari.
And this is Dr. Kochak.
And you're listening to the Breast Podcast Ever. Broadcasting from Columbus, Ohio, we'll be talking about plastic surgery procedures focusing on only the breast.
Ranging from breast reconstruction to breast enhancement and reduction, we'll cover everything you ever wanted to know about the breast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Breast Podcast Ever. We are very, very fortunate today. Dr. Kochak and I have a special guest. Melissa from Flat Closure Now is here with us. And so I'm going to let Melissa introduce herself before we get into it.
Sure. Hi, I'm Melissa Jansen. I am a founding member of Flat Closure Now. I have a fashion website called I Don't Need To, where I give fashion advice to women who are living one-breasted. And I also have a one-breasted Facebook group called One Breasted Beauties. So
I am so excited to have this conversation with you because this is a topic that is not really covered that much. You know, there's a lot of solutions for a patient who's undergone a bilateral mastectomy. But, you know, the one-breastedness, the uni-boobiness, I think those are things that don't get talked about. So maybe start by telling us your story. How did how did this all come to be? When did you decide that this was something that was an important issue for you to tackle?
Well, like you all know that probably a few years ago, you didn't think you were going to end up having a podcast talking about fashion with a one-breasted woman.
That's for sure. I don't think we were planning it.
I, didn't come into this thinking, I was going to be doing all of these things. Or, when I had a gorgeous hot body when I was in my 20s, I certainly didn't think, I'm going to be posting photos of myself naked on the internet in my 40s. But here we are. So I found my lump. And at the time, I had a lot of things going on in my life. And I'm the kind of person that likes to think about things before I take action. And so my daughter was about to get married. I had a very close friend who had just died. I was in the middle of a lot of things. So I just did internet searches like, what does this mean? What does a breast lump mean? What is it going to mean? What's going to happen to my body? And so I had a lot of time to think about things before I went to a doctor and knew what my options were. And so I had seen an article by Catherine Guthrie in Oprah Magazine, which had, photos of people that were flat with bilateral mastectomy, but there was no images of one-breasted women. And I knew that after seeing those photos, I really wanted to go flat because I just felt the images were really provocative and the women seemed confident in their photographs. And so I thought I want to do that, but there were no images of one-breasted women. And so I searched the internet and I couldn't find anything.
Wait, what year is this now?
So this was only in 2017.
Okay.
So 3 years ago, and there were no images. There were no hashtag unilateral mastectomy on Instagram. So I started that. And I don't know. I'm one of those people that's like, I like to be a little bit different. And I thought, now what am I going to wear? And, even when you Google mastectomy, it doesn't show you images. You get bra ads. So I was thinking, well, how am I going to have a bra if I don't have a breast? I wasn't even thinking there was such thing as a prosthetic in my head. No. So I don't know. I just came up with this idea of like challenging myself. Well, if I did that, then what was I going to wear? And then it became I posted a few months after my mastectomy, I posted an image of myself in a bathing suit and people started saying like, oh my God, I can't believe, are you one-breasted? Because you can't tell. And I thought, hey, then I started posting images of all of these tops that I was wearing and you really couldn't tell that I was one-breasted. And so that is how I ended up doing my website and gained a following by that.
I mean, take us to that decision when you posted an image of yourself. I mean, that's you're very vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage to do that. What led up to that?
Well, for me, so I was at a point in time where I really loved my body. And so when I was Googling things, I would go on YouTube and there were all of these women that were crying, about how they were about to lose their breasts. And I didn't feel that way at all. I, have been through a lot of other traumas in my life. And so breast cancer was not something that was a trauma to me. It was something that was like something that I was going to tackle. Now, you also have to remember, I was lucky. I caught it very early, so I didn't have to do chemo. One of the reasons why I decided not to have a lumpectomy is because I didn't want radiation. So I just had the mastectomy. And I remember the doctor was kind of shocked as well, when I said I wanted to be one-breasted. And, my husband came with me to every meeting and he said, I remember the doctor saying, and I know that these are all things that as a man, you guys are just like, maybe. I'm making an assumption here. But you get into this to make women feel better about their bodies, right? I would assume.
Yeah.
Right? And so for him, it was an odd thing that I wanted to go flat. And so he said to me and my husband, this will affect your sex life. And I kind of laughed at him and said, you've never had sex with me, so how do you think this is going to affect my sex life?
Well, I think what you're saying is so important because it's not only important for patients, it's very, very important for patients to see this, but it's very important for doctors, for plastic surgeons in particular, to understand what you're saying. Because I think one thing that Dr. Kochak and I are trying to do with this podcast is for us, for both of us, to appreciate and understand, and almost unlearn what we've learned in residency and training. There's so much of our training that goes into symmetry and proportionality, but the real answer is what makes the patient feel good, what makes you as a woman feel good about yourself, and some of that's even harder to understand. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us like this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. And it's funny because there's a lot of there's in the flat community, there's a lot of sort of, what are these surgeons thinking when they make assumptions? But we all make assumptions all of the time.
That's so true what you're saying.
And so it was great to have this rapport, to feel comfortable enough to have this rapport with my surgeon. And actually, my husband laughed at him and said, you got to do what my wife wants, because she's the kind of person that you tell her you can't do this and she'll go ahead and do it. And maybe that was sort of my personality was, I dare myself to be different. Like there's nothing wrong. And then of course, I started off with my fashion website thinking, how do I hide this? And now it's kind of evolved into like, why should I be ashamed of being one-breasted? And why do I have to go out into the world, with this assumption that when we have so much body positivity stuff going on in the world about women and their weight and, assumptions on, skin and all of these different things, why is there still an assumption that to be comfortable as a woman, you have to have two breasts? And so, or even any breasts, because that's not what I think of myself as a woman. So it's so complex. I can't imagine being
I actually have a question, just out of curiosity. So around the time when you were going through this and you're saying, okay, I'm not going to have a reconstruction. It sounds like you had a lot of good rapport with your plastic surgeon.
I did.
Did the plastic surgeon at that time did they make it clear that you could have a reconstruction later? And
yes.
Did that weigh into your decision at all? Or you know
what? It really did. It really did help me. And I do say that to a lot of women. You can go back and have surgery anytime you want if you're in America. I mean, if you have good health insurance, you can do it later. So a lot of women do think about, what are they going to do? And for me, I always tell people you can do it later. And my group really sort of is a great group to come into to know, like, you know, you can ask questions, you know, how do you feel about this? Has anybody had an expander and, you know, now they've decided they want to go flat and have it taken out? Has anybody, you know, thought about doing reconstruction? How do people, you know, get along wearing prosthetics? I know that I can go back later at any time. And yes, that definitely did. My doctor did make me feel comfortable enough to say, hey, you can come back anytime you want and get reconstruction. And he also told me, you can come back anytime and have your other breast removed if you're not happy being one-breasted. And so, yeah, that really did help me with my decision. And in fact, he was going to do a skin-sparing mastectomy. And we talked about that. And then on the day of surgery, or the last talk that I had with him, I told him I wanted to go flat. And then when I had my surgery, I remember before going in, he said, now, are you sure that this is what you want? And I said to him, you know, I wasn't sure. And then yesterday I read through everything all over again. And I know this is what I want. And so he said, okay. And I actually, when I got out of my surgery and came to, one of the first photos of me being half flat is when I was still drugged up. They were taking off my gown and putting me in my clothes. And I said to my husband, I looked down and I said, I look great. Take a photo of me. And so I'm really grateful. You know, I have that photo of me. And I actually did take photographs, a lot of photographs of myself beforehand. And then afterwards, I took comparison photos. And in my comparison photos, I have so much more confidence in my one-breasted images. And I think it was the first time that I actually had a choice in my body and what it was going to look like. Does that sound weird? Because I was really choosing to have something.
Not at all.
But it was like a powerful thing for me to be able to say, like, I'm making this choice about my body and nobody else gets to make that choice for me.
Wow. Okay, so tell us, you've been through this, you know, emotional empowerment. How did you take that into a group? And tell us about the growth of Flat Closure Now and the community that you've kind of helped create here.
Sure. So there was only one group at the time, which was Flat and Fabulous. And I think a lot of people gravitated to that group because, you know, they'd heard about it and whatever. But they're very limited in what you can post about. And so Emily Hopper, who has Empower House, started the group Flatties Unite. And I was very close with her. We got a really good rapport going. And so she started this group, and before you know it, it had thousands of members in it. And we post about anything, really. And they also, the thing that I felt about, for me personally, Flat and Fabulous, there were a lot of women that were in that group saying, you're going to feel really horrible if you go one-breasted. Everybody's miserable one-breasted. And so I was like, no, I'm not miserable. I'm kind of feel really good about myself. And so I was constantly in that specific group trying to counter this notion that you were going to be unhappy if you only had your one breast removed and if you were half flat. It's, I've been told it was going to be uncomfortable. There were all of these things. And there are problems with being one-breasted. Obviously, there's still no bras made for one-breasted women, which I had grappled in working with, but it looks like there's a company in Spain who's going to start really doing that. And so that, we started that group, or Emily started that group. And then from there, it just became so many women just talking about prosthetics by being one-breasted that I decided to start my group, One-Breasted Beauties. And also imagery, there was no positive imagery of one-breasted women or zero-breasted women. So that's kind of where Flat Closure Now came about. There were no sort of resources if you Googled flat. And it was kind of this sort of secret society that we felt like we needed to change. And so, we all as a group got together with quite a lot of us at one point in time. And then, people petered off and started doing their own thing. And so, it's just evolved. It's evolved into now there's many websites that you can go to. There's many people doing different offshoots. There is Renee Ridgely, she's got a website and a whole thing about trying to get women in media called Less Than Two Breasts. And she's working a lot with Dr. Love. And I think she's starting to gain relationships with Dr. Atai. She was in the entertainment industry and her husband still is. So yeah, she's trying to get more attention in television and film.
One thing I always think about, we live in Columbus, Ohio, Dr. Kochak and I, it's the home of Limited Brands, which is the parent company of Victoria's Secret. And, so that people don't know that, but Columbus is kind of like the fashion capital of the Midwest. And, one big problem that Victoria's Secret has had is it's really kind of hung on to that perfect image of women from like the days of, the angels and all those things, which, to be honest, I think are dated now. And it's part of the reason that I think not only has fashion moved beyond that Victoria's Secret image, but I think society has. So maybe you've spoken about that a little bit, but touch on how sort of the changes in society factor into the development of the, flat denial, flat closure movement.
Well, I think more people are realizing, I think more surgeons are realizing, especially with flat closure now, that this is not something that, people are feeling bad about their body. That was the first concept that we really wanted to change because, you think, oh, you're going to be unhappy. And that was really all there was out there too. When I was Googling things and doing research was, especially the images used to be of women who, were in the middle of reconstruction. So they didn't look their best. Yeah, I think there's a lot of body positivity. There's the LGBTQ community that's sort of changing the way people look at fashion. YouTube with, the men who are doing makeup tutorials. There's just this great, huge shift in society in general about what are we supposed to look like. God, that's got to be really confusing for you as a plastic surgeon to have thought that, you are trying to make people feel good about their bodies in ways, that are non-conventional, I guess. And then, or no, maybe it was conventional. And now it's becoming not as conventional to do those things. I feel like fashion, really, I think what we're realizing fashion is it's not a piece of clothing. It's about how you feel when you put something on. So, how you feel in a certain scrubs.
That's why I wear scrubs all the time.
Right? And you feel comfortable in them.
Of course.
So that's your fashion.
Actually, Dr. Tawari has ones that he calls dress scrubs. So if we have to do something, he'll actually they're the all black ones. It's just basically the equivalent of a tuxedo, and
those are my tuxedo scrubs.
We were going to meet some people one night at dinner, and I asked him. I said, "Oh man, I don't have any clothes with me. I'm just in scrubs." He goes, "No." He goes, "Don't worry, I'm in scrubs, but I'm wearing my dress scrubs." I have a question. So it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like with your path, it sounds like you did have a plastic surgeon involved at some point. You had a consultation, but they never operated on you. Is that correct?
So I actually had a breast surgeon who's been doing breast surgery for 30 years that wanted me to go see a plastic surgeon. And I said, no, I don't need a plastic surgeon. So, he was so sort of like, even though you don't want it, you don't know until you've gone to see him. And I kind of felt like I was going to be persuaded, and I didn't want to be persuaded. So I didn't. But my breast surgeon was very skilled. I felt really lucky that he was maybe, I don't know. He heard me. He listened to me.
So, and you've been in this world now for quite a bit, and put a lot of effort and energy into and probably met a lot of people. The one thing that from our angle as plastic surgeons that is, we're trying to get more involved and understand more. It doesn't seem, or tell us a little bit about what you've encountered in terms of breast surgeons and maybe being able to accomplish a flat closure. Is a plastic surgeon necessary? Because we really think that the flat closure process should be considered a reconstructive option, not just a lack of a reconstruction. It's actually a reconstruction. And some people it takes more or less. So tell us your thoughts on that.
And it's great because I recall I think the problem becomes that women now say that they want to go flat and they don't understand that might actually take a few surgeries as well. So, they come into this sort of idea that they're going to also have a one and done. And so there's a lot of me trying to explain to people that might not necessarily be the case because your surgeon is caring about getting your cancer out first and foremost. Like that's the most important thing, right? It's not about what you look like because basic plastic surgery and breast surgery is very different from a cancer surgery. Yeah. And so I know that me gaining quite a bit of weight and with now have a little bit of lymphedema, I am not as flat as I used to be. And so there is a little bit of extra skin and I'm willing to bet that I can go to my surgeon and say, hey, it's 3 years down the line and, I'm not perfectly flat and I do need, this excess skin removed. And so I think that there is this misperception that some flat people have gotten, which we now have to counter, where, they're going to go out and look perfect flat as they would have maybe looked perfect with their reconstruction. And that's not necessarily the case. There's so many, as there's so many different things, how much you weigh and all of that. So I think as breast surgeons, it's important to let them know that if they're saying they want to go flat or want to, go half flat, that you might not get the look. And also, it takes so long to heal. Even though you're flat, it takes so long to heal. I mean, it took me, I tell people all the time, it took me 7 months to feel okay again in my body. I mean, I had a lot of pain. I had an unusual amount of pain, I feel. And I had a lot of swelling that didn't go down for a really long time. So I think that is the misperception when people say they want to go flat. Maybe they think it's going to be an easier, they say that a lot. Oh, it's just going to be easier for me. And I don't want all of that.
It's so interesting how you say that the result you started with isn't the result you have today. This is something, just like any reconstruction that, that we do, implant, autologous tissue. We always tell our patients on, when we're done that first day, this could look very different in a few years, depending on different things, right? If there's been radiation or no radiation, but that's why I think it's so important to view this as a reconstructive process, because just like any other reconstructive process, it's going to require maintenance over time, possibly. And that's why I think, and I do think that that's going to be an important message for us to get across. And I think as we do, I think breast surgeons will also start to, come to realize that they may or may not accomplish a flat closure, but as long as they know the plastic surgery world supports that and is there to help them, accomplish that, I think we'll continue to work with them, seamlessly like we have around reconstructions. So that's fascinating.
Right. And I think maybe, there was this there's an assumption in the flat community that plastic surgeons are just really trying to get you to do reconstruction because, it's a money-making thing. And I don't personally believe that. I mean, I think I've had enough interesting conversations with surgeons like you that I know that is not the intention whatsoever. But if we can get enough surgeons to understand that when women want to go flat, you need to explain to them that might necessarily not happen on the first surgery, because you don't know if there's puckering, you don't know if there's gonna be, extra arm stuff going on. And I don't know. I think there's all of these misperceptions. And I think that it's also because you're in a position that is higher than, there's a power dynamic which is complicated to some people.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think there is a power dynamic issue. And I think that surgeons aren't always even aware of that, but patients are very aware of it. And I think it's why people will come in to a plastic surgeon, for example, and feel like they get a result that they didn't quite understand. Because I think there is this perception that you can't question the physician. But on the flip side, we want to be questioned. We want to engage in this type of conversation because it's really hard without it to know what the patient wants, And Dr. Kocak and I always say this is, there really is no right answer. The right answer is what works for you, for your job and your home and your exercise and all the things that go into making you you. Yeah. We have to understand, and you got to do it in
at that given time. It changes from time to time. At that point in one's life, it's also very important to understand. So that's so critical.
Well, yeah. So, I was a little different in that I wasn't crushed. I wasn't making I wasn't making a decision based on only just finding out I had cancer. I found my lump myself. I knew pretty much instinctively it was cancer straight away. I investigated my options way before I even went to a doctor and was told, this is what you have. So, I had already in my mind processed so much stuff. But most women, that's not how they get to you. They get to you in they're in emergency mode. They think they're going to die.
But, we see a surprising number of people, it's a growing number of people who are well out from, their surgeries and reconstructions who are now coming to the table to have them, completely taken out. Obviously, most of those patients are people with implant reconstructions. Don't really see it for autologous ones, but that's certainly, now you've got people who aren't under the pressure and stress of dealing with the diagnosis. But it's interesting that we're seeing more and more people in the delayed setting.
And I wonder if that is, obviously we all know that with regard to, the new news that they've decided that, some implants can cause cancer and other problems. I think the thing is that women are, as we get older, we do feel more comfortable with our body. We do know, whether we're happy with our body, whether we're not happy with our body. And it's always interesting because if people say, I'm still not sure what I want, I actually say to them, do you love your body right now? Because if you don't, you're probably not going to love your body, whatever they do to it.
Interesting.
And, I really loved my body at the time. I felt great in my body. And so I knew that I was still going to feel okay with my body. And, with regard to sex, obviously I still have a nipple. I still have a breast. So, but I do notice that is not, I think my husband and I have talked. If I had to have my other breast removed, we know it wouldn't affect our sex life because, he sees me flat or half flat and he does still touch me there just as much as he touches my breast. So that fear for most women that they're not going to feel good or, it's going to affect their sex life, it may affect some. I'm not going to lie. Some men that is what they're into and it's hard for them. But, it's just so many things with breast cancer that obviously are not the same with, skin cancer or.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we often engage in when we have conversations with our patients and before they have surgery, if having an elective prophylactic mastectomy on the other side, one of the points we always bring up, there's obvious things about how it may not change their survival, all that stuff, whatever. But one of the things we usually visit is, have you thought about the fact that saving that breast will save a nipple, will save the things that go along with having a breast and a nipple, like the erogenous sense. And so we always bring that up because I don't think people sometimes always think of that when they're making the sort of decision to take off that other breast. It's really good to hear you bring it up. So that's nice that you're able to talk about it and share that.
And, breastfeeding. for women who think that they might still want to have children, they can breastfeed. And, that I think that's one of the reasons why I post so much pictures and started doing my pic, because I was, I thought and was told, it might affect my sex life. And so, I wasn't the kind of person, obviously, that was going to be posting erotic photos of myself. But here I do that. I do very racy sort of photos that I post. Obviously, I can't post full-on photos because of censorship. And that's another reason why there's not very many images of one-breasted women, is because of censorship. I have to be very careful what kind of photos I post, because I've gotten removed many, many times.
They're pretty strict out there.
Yeah, so I have to be pretty tricky with what I post. But still, it was really about sort of challenging that, you can't look sexy with one breast. And I think you can. You can definitely look very sexy with zero breasts.
I think it's such a great message to relay. So in an attempt to try to keep this around 30 minutes, which is what we've been trying to do, I'm going to throw out one last thing. I mean, the most likely person watching this is someone who's, looking at this option, either, immediate or delayed, like we talked about. And I guess, if you want to kind of lead out with just a few words that you want to share with that community, I'd say this is the best time to do it. If you have some last words of advice or thoughts as they move forward in their internet search for information.
Sure. Well, if you search now the hashtag unilateral mastectomy, you will see a lot of images that I've encouraged other half flat women to find. And you can go to my website. I don't need to. You can go to Flat Closure Now. They have a fantastic gallery. And I just, I'm grateful to have met you. I would have never thought that I would be talking to, having such a great rapport with two plastic surgeons about such interesting topics.
Well, we thoroughly appreciate you and taking the time today to chat with us. And I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll be back soon with another episode of this good stuff. And we really appreciate your time today, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Melissa, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you found this episode helpful.
Want more info? Connect with us at mwbreast.com.
And go behind the scenes with us on Instagram at mwbreast. Thanks for tuning in.
And join us next week.